in good stead here. We see the Nimzo Indian defense, Black's bishop coming out to pin the white knight early. Fedoseev used this move, queen to c2, yesterday against Magnus Carlsen. We see a quick trade, and white has the bishop pair, but black ahead in development. A lot of theory here. Tanya, you're a d4 player. You must have seen this position at some point.
Yes, and I like these positions with black. And also, let's remind everyone before we deep dive into the ideas that this is a best of two. So the margin for error is so little. You have to keep things under control, take calculated risk, because to come back is never easy with such few matches. And we see after 8-6, one set of minor pieces has been traded off. White, of course, had the option to even fall back with the bishop, but going for a more direct approach here, knight to f3, and Robert, Jan slows down before capturing on c4. Does that surprise you?
Well, I think it's what we've been talking about. The margins are thin here. With just 2 game matches, if you make one slip in the opening and give Vladimir Fedoseev the advantage, you may not come back from it. And look at this queen on c5. What an annoying piece to deal with. It's just sitting here saying you can't touch your b-pawn to develop your bishop if you encaro it because your knight is loose. You can't easily move the knight because the c7 pawn is behind it. All the while, you're protecting your pawn on d4. So Jan, he's got his face in his hands right now. David, have you seen this queen c5 idea before? And has Jan is the more important question.
I must admit I'm not too familiar with this queen c5 move. As far as I was aware, dropping back the queen to c3 was the main move in that position. That's appeared in multiple master games. The whole idea is, firstly, as you mentioned, to keep pressure on this black knight, but also to clamp down, to stop black breaking out with e5. And that has very much been set up now with this last move. Black's rook activating. He's pretty much guaranteeing Jan Nepomniachtchi that he wants to throw that e-pawn forward to develop the black bishop, just to open lines towards the white king while it's still stuck in the center. And yeah, certainly Jan Nepomniachtchi was surprised. I believe a rare move, but after recomposing himself correctly, just improving a piece, correctly setting up a threat, and I'm equally surprised to see Fedoseev think now, because if this was prepared, if this was home cooking, as we say, queen to c5, something he studied before, then surely he would have examined what to do after black's most natural move, rook to e8. And there we go, knight into e5, blocking black's main idea. It's pretty much one side saying what they want to do next, and Fedoseev's shutting the door in his face. What do you make of this knight exchange now? Robert, this is changing the pawn structure, changing the dynamic of the game.
But white has these double pawns that may seem bad, but white just has more active pieces, despite the fact that the king remains in the center. So black offers a queen trade. White will likely bring a rook on a semi-open line. It's about developing these pieces on the king side that can't get out. So Tanya, at first glance, I don't love double pawns, but I like activity, open files. What do you make of this position? Because the engine off to the side of the board here says it's pretty level. Would you rather have white or black in this setup?
I started earlier, I do like these lines with the black pieces in the Nimzo, and I think the main idea for black was to get e5 in, which now has been stopped at the cost of these double pawns. But while white has been doing that, it allows black to finish development. For example, all right, he's taken on c5. I was thinking of ideas of actually sacrificing on c7 with white's king still in the center. Maybe we'll see that, because the main problem in this position for black is to develop that light squared bishop. That is the absolute key. And very often in these structures, you can even give up the c7 pawn, open up the c line to do just that for development. For example, a move like b6 comes to my mind, or you're highlighting the move bishop d7, which the more I see, I like that one as well. The main point is that if white was to get greedy with the c7 pawn, your entire king side is still in the house. You haven't moved a single piece. Black can quickly take out the bishop, can bring the rook to the open line, and very often that gives more than enough compensation for the pawn.
I'm with you. I think that's a viable option, whether you play b6 or bishop d7. Jan, he's sitting in for another think, because this is a critical moment. Sometimes when we review games, David, we quickly just press the next button, just go through it. But this could be a game-changing moment, whether he sacrifices the pawn or plays rook e7. I'm going to ask you the question, David, knowing your answer. You love material, so I'm assuming you'd play a move like rook e7 or pawn to c6 here to keep that pawn.
You know me too well, Robert. I wouldn't hesitate. I would keep that black pawn on the board. But I'm not Jan Nepomniachtchi. I know him very well, and I think his instinct, he's mulling it over now, his instinct is to sacrifice, to play actively, dynamically. All of these top players, they want to play the most ambitious move. They don't want to just sit there, passively defend, let their opponent dictate the pace of the game, to have the upper hand, to have more fun. So I agree with Tanya. Jan is definitely considering it. He's no, he's not a timid, scaredy cat like me, but I jinxed it. There we go. Rook to e7. He is a timid, scaredy cat like me. Rook to e7, defending the pawn, and black is passive.
I think Jan just made this move for you, David. He knows you're commentating on it. This is your style. He's playing according to what you want him to do right now. But it also makes a lot of sense because, again, white is so far behind in development that black perhaps has the time to do it. But this is what I was afraid of. Because now anytime you move the b pawn, which he's done it, white can perhaps put the bishop on g2. For example, right now itself, you can take the rook on c5. White will capture the rook on a8. Black's the one with the double pawns. The bishop's still on c8. I'm just wondering who does this trade favor, Robert?
Yeah, this would definitely favor white. I know we were saying how white's double pawns in the center weren't so bad. Those double isolated pawns for black would have been awful. So rook b8, I think that's the proper response. This rook now has to slide back as it's under attack, and that does give black the time to push this backwards pawn or trade off the light square bishops. I actually think that Jan is handling this perfectly. There could still be some sort of attacking chances on the king side if Jan isn't careful. Eventually a rook sliding to g1 and pawn to g5. But so far, everything looks fine in black's position. It's about developing, trading off key pieces. And speaking of rook d7, David, that is an excellent move. I was thinking bishop to b7, but he says your best piece is actually your rook rather than your bishop staring into thin air. Love moves like rook to d7, despite the fact that you moved the same piece numerous times.
Rooks become the most powerful pieces often in the endgame. It's all about open lines, open files, and that open D line for the white rook was ready to be utilized, and now just neutralizing the opponent's piece. I wouldn't be surprised to see the black king step towards the center as well in the next few turns, just to, again, challenge. There we go, king to f8, to control those key entry squares. The white rook wants to enter, wants to creep into the black camp, but the black king is going to shut the door. And white was kind of obliged there to castle himself. The white king now not too happy, stuck on one of the flanks. Kings want to be in the center. It's easier to kind of use direction, switch up direction later. But it was more important to connect the rooks. So I've got to say, this is going in black's favor. On the camera, you can't really tell who the happier player is. But Fedoseev, I fear for him here. Long term, if all the rooks disappear, black is simply going to win. Black's queenside pawns, those 3 versus 2 on that left flank, they're going to march forward. And we talked about double pawns earlier, Tanya. White's kingside majority far harder to utilize.
That's really well put, that if all the pieces are traded and it's a pure king pawn ending, black is essentially a pawn up. It's so much easier for black to create a passer. It's just a winning endgame. So white needs to be careful. To me, Robert, it looks like it might be time for white to start thinking about a pawn roll on the king side. That's why you had the majority. You're already thinking about pushing that f pawn, pushing that h pawn, get f4, f5 in. Because if you don't do anything, then David's idea of trading pieces could become a big reality. While Fedoseev has a think in this position, Robert, update us with what is happening on the other big matchup between Alireza and Jose. Again, 2 players on their last lives.
Yeah, this game, it's deep into the ending where both sides are trying to stop the other's plans. And here on the right-hand side of our screen, we see that Jose Martinez with the white pieces against Alireza Firouzja. It's a pretty level game with white having a knight versus a black bishop. So as I look across these matches, so far there's been little separation between these players, and I just think that it's a pretty balanced affair.
Looks pretty much symmetrical, the pawn structure here. I'm looking at the cameras as well. Both look pretty calm. Feels like Jose Martinez doesn't want to take any risk here with white. It's, after all, as you mentioned, Tanya, a 2-game match. Losing with white would be a cardinal sin here. You cannot get away with it. Then again, the symmetry, we talked about open lines. White is the one with slightly more active pieces. White's queen more active than its counterpart, and white occupying the only open line, the e-file. So question mark attached to this last move, Tanya. Can you see any specific reasons, or why could that be a mistake?
To me, it looks like such a natural move because you want to make sure your queen's free to move around a little bit, your d-pawn's protected. Rook d8 would be a move that we'd all want to make in this position. You put the rook on a nice square. It's actually doing something there. But I think here the eternal question, I'm going to throw it to both of you here. it's knights versus bishop. In these kind of position, what do we prefer? Do we prefer the knight or do we prefer the bishop? Robert, I'm going to start with you.
Well, the bishop is kind of biting on granite with this pawn chain here is right in the bishop's path. So there's no good, useful diagonal to work with. Knight e5, that wasn't the move. So I think we should analyze, just bring up the analysis board for a second, because this move gets an X. I'm going to look and see what was the improvement ever so quickly. And it says that b4, that's why rook d8 earned a question mark, is that white should try to spring free a passed pawn if black were to take on b4. Now we see how clear it is. That pawn will push. A rook trade at some point will help white clear the road for that passed pawn. So this, I wouldn't really consider it a huge mistake from white. It's hard to spot these ideas and it creates weaknesses. But David, now that we see it, grinding like a grandmaster, it could have been a good start by pushing some of these outside pawns.
B4 would have been a really instructive, really classy move, switching focus there with black off balance, suddenly playing on the queen side, but very hard to see, as you say. Probably the most difficult thing in chess is knowing when to kind of go for these exchanges, when to change the structure, when to start taking action, when it looks like you can just slowly maneuver and improve. And I did prefer the queen and knight combo over the queen and bishop. The knight is the only piece that can act in a way a queen cannot, so queen and knight together do often work wonders, but now that the bishop and knight have both disappeared, fewer imbalances here. White is only playing with one kind of small kind of aesthetic advantage, at least that's the open file. But if queens disappear, I don't think you can really profit from that small thing. So the problem for Jose Martinez, he wants to kind of drop the white queen back, kind of set up a battery along the e-file, but there is a white hanging pawn on a4. So he's kind of tied down. Tanya, queen exchange. Like Robert said, I love to grind like a grandmaster in an endgame to push, to try to look for these small advantages, but I'm struggling to see any.
I'm going to first ask the burning question. Who came up with the name grind like a grandmaster?
I can give away a little trade secret. It was originally, the title was meant to be Grind Like Gelfand, because when I was young, he ground me down in some long 7-hour endgames. He did the same to Magnus a few times, but in the end, Grind Like a Grandmaster was a bit more catchy. So GLG, that's what we call it.
I love it. And we keep alluding to that book that you co-authored with Magnus Carlsen. And I think we might be seeing another grind coming out in this. Now, even if the queens were to get traded, would it completely be leveled? Because I see one open file. White has total control of it. The rook from e5 can give a check and maybe start targeting the queenside pawn. It looks like the black rook, even if the queens are traded off, will be more passive, at least for a while. And Robert's idea of eventually getting b4 in, white might be the first one to create a passer. Even if it's an endgame, I think white's got something to play for here, David.
Certainly. You never give up. That's the kind of 101 of the grind. It's like in life. I'm sure all the viewers at home, sometimes you have to work a bit harder. You have to work overtime at the office. You have to kind of really dig deep, even when you're not feeling it too much. You have to find the energy from somewhere. And that's what Jose Martinez has to do right now. Like you say, Tanya, queen exchange, whoa, I was about to say was inevitable. Take the queens off and then try to look for small advantages. White's king coming to the center. Instead, he gambits a pawn. Robert, I was saying earlier, this was pretty much impossible. Should black just snack on that straggler on a4? Jose raising his eyebrows there. Do you think he missed it? Is this intentional?
It's intentional, and it's kind of what you were hinting at earlier, that these players, they will give up material if it means that they get active play. So just to put this sample line on the board, in Alireza, he doesn't have to take the pawn, although I think that white's intentions are clear. If queen takes pawn on a4, if we can just show this quickly, the rook comes up to e7, and now we see the white queen joining, c7 is loose. If you try to protect this pawn by just pushing it to safety, you can already see that the black queen is out of play, and white can even play Alpha Zero style to try and get after the black king. So the engine doesn't seem phased. It says that black can snack on that pawn, but I would personally be a little bit worried with having my queen offside like this, even if it's objective equality. I think practically speaking, Tanya, it does seem like white has a little bit more fun. The a pawn, not so relevant just yet.
It's a really nice point made by you. You sacrifice a pawn for activity, and it really feels like Jose's style as well to get into these kind of positions. But it's also Alireza's style. He picks it up because white was in any case planning to go rook e7, a difficult threat to fight. And now this is going to be quite the fireworks on the board, unexpectedly so over the last few moves. It looked like a very slow position. it's blowing up. The queen from e2 is going to step on to f3, start targeting the f7 pawn. Right now, black needs to answer the most immediate question. How are you defending c7? The first move that came to my mind was slip up with the rook to d7. You want to challenge that rook on the 7th rank, but I think that's dangerous because then white can give a check on e8. You come up with your king to g7, queen e5, and suddenly we see that the only move black will have is f6, and I think David with rook e7, check, it just felt like it would be too dangerous for white. So instead, we've got the move c5, and my question to you is, can white go queen to f3? Ignore the center. Well, he answers it. He wants to take on the c5 pawn instead.
He actually preferred your move there, Tanya. I think he might well try it now on the next turn. There we go. Still this checkmate in 2 threat. The f7 pawn is hit, needs to be defended. And Firouzja, notice how he's going passive here out of necessity. I talk about divorce here with the black king, the black queen. They're so far apart from each other, and that spells trouble. So you often have to put a piece passive just while the queen is absent from the defense. And here we go. Equal material yet again. The pawn has been snapped off, but things are disappearing. I think Firouzja has calculated really, really well that he can liquidate the whole queenside, that all those queenside pawns will just fall off the board. And why is he hesitating? Surely he's going to push that a pawn now. Maybe he's just slightly afraid that the white rook will zoom over and prevent that pawn from continuing its advance. Still, I don't know, Robert, I would slightly prefer white in this position.
I definitely would prefer to have the white side of this position just because white has the activity. So I have to say, both players playing a nearly perfect game. Jose, he went for the activity. There were some practical problems that still need to be solved from the black side. But I think that, there we go. I was about to say one little precise move away from full equality for Alireza. The queen protects the pawn. It also protects the king side, this f7 pawn, which has been a weak point, and puts pressure on the c3 pawn. So I do think in the near future, we'll just see pieces, as you would say, David, hoovered off the board, and we are likely to see a split point. So Tanya, I mean, it's been a fun game in this one, but I get the sense that the life is kind of sucked out of it. Although Alpha Zero style play on the king side, Jose is not going to let this game fizzle out without more of a fight.
I agree, but I think black can just simply stop that Alpha Zero-esque plan of h5 with all white's dreams on the king side. Eventually, I'm foreseeing the a pawn being traded off for the c pawn. Can we say that draw is not too far away in this one?
Looks that way. I think a draw is almost inevitable, and maybe we take a step out and go to the bird's eye view, because the other game, while a draw is still possible there, it's heating up. It's a pawn race. It's only rooks and pawns left, and suddenly look at that black king on the left-hand board. Fedoseev against Jan Nepomniachtchi. All these king walks we've seen throughout the tournament so far, throughout Division 1. Black's king has entered, started grabbing pawns, and temporarily, black is a pawn ahead. Evaluation bar on his side as well. Robert, what do you make of this? Has Fedoseev just lost control, or was this an intentional gamble on his part?
Well, we got into an endgame. Good, and they're doubled no more because black is up a pawn on the left-hand side of our screen. So Tanya, she said she wanted from the black side the whole way. She thought that that opening was good for Jan Nepomniachtchi, and it's proven to be the case. So Vladimir Fedoseev hasn't been good from him. He is trying to challenge black on the 7th rank with his rook, but it feels like Jan, with precise play and with 2 minutes and change on his clock, he should get the job done.
I think this is one of those games which is going to become a model game for the Nimzo Indian. Queen c5, a new idea tried, but it didn't really lead anywhere. And I think the way Jan handled it, trying to get the e5 break in, then how he developed the queenside bishops. And now look at this king, this rook. The king activity and the rook activity in these kind of... Here, black already has an extra pawn, and Jan wants to keep as many of those pawns alive on the king side. I see some real winning chances in this one, David. What do you make of it? Do you think
moves. It's pretty much guaranteed to be a win now. The 4 versus 2 there, they're going to start running. In the meantime, small update, the other game we were following did, as predicted, end in a draw. Queens came off, pawns came off, dead. We've got left in the losers quarterfinal, and yeah, just Jan. A couple of turns ago, just push pawns. When in doubt, if you don't know what to do, it's the end game. Get as close to promotion as possible, and that's what Fedoseyev's trying to do now. The problem is, connected pass pawns, the Black King is going to shepherd. Black's Rook is doing a fantastic job later. I think it's a race, but Black is just too far ahead. Even if Black were to lose his Rook for the white B pawn in the near future, Black's pawns by then would be too far down the board. So this one, I think he's almost got it in the bag. That's how to stay on the front foot. Looks good, Robert.
I loved this move, this latest move, king to g3. I'm sure pawn takes pawn on g4 was also winning, but you're already up material, and it's not about grabbing more pawns. It's stealing a pawn on g4. He said, let me just push. And now, yes, on h3, after the rook takes the pawn, he can bring his king back and then push his passers. I don't see why you would even waste any time. Push this one all the way up the board. Jan says, all right, I just feel like it's important to take this one. It doesn't. He has been spot on.
I was saying it's going to be a model game for Nimzo, and I think it's going to be a model game for how you play a rook pawn ending. We've been highlighting the piece activity as well. That the game, and we see both pawns moving forward. This is just a matter of a couple of moves, and I think this is busted for Fedoseev. He needs more than a miracle to save this one.
He needs more than 14 seconds as well. Game technique.
Really good stuff by Jan Nepomniachtchi. This event for Fedoseev, that's a big danger. He has to win on demand. Meanwhile, Alireza and Jose Martinez, Robert, an active game but ended peacefully.
There was some good chess in that game, but little can be done.